Hi Booktube, and welcome to a new video. This is a recent reads for 5 books. A debut novel, Line, by the Irish writer Niall Bourke, who is resident in London. The Listeners by Jordan Tannahill, a Canadian playwright. This is his debut novel. To Each His Own, the latest in my quest to read all of Leonardo Sciascia's work, Italian author. This was translated by Adriana Fuch, who translated at least one of his other books. This is the first edition of a book of his that I don't have in the Granter series. This is through Carsonet. Divorcer, which is short stories by Gari, Lutz, and Assembly by Natasha Brown, which is also a debut novel. She is British. So I'm going to start with Line by Niall Bourke. So this starts off in a sort of dystopian setting where there is an endless line of people and they are sort of living rough under sort of canvas with minimal items, and it almost has a sort of spiritual dimension. They don't know what's at the end of this queue, but they know that that is all there is to life, is to attain the end, and that either side of them is just sort of wastelands. And this sort of endless line of people has formed its own sort of rules and regulations of what you can do. You're not allowed to jump the line. If you get married, you can only marry someone behind you, and you have to go back into their place. All this sort of stuff. And it's really well done, because I'm not a huge fan of dystopian fiction, but it's an interesting concept in and of itself. You know, how a sort of a seemingly arbitrary human group activity evolves its own rules and regulations. But the hero and his girlfriend, they want to get away. They want to escape, and they're warned against it. We're shown what happens to people who escape and then are captured or come back, because their crime is not that they ran away. Their crime is that they deem to want to jump the queue, and it's pretty brutal what happens to them. But they do escape. And then the book sort of, there's still this dystopian element to it, into sort of, you know, what lies beyond the line. But what's so clever about this book, because it, you know, ostensibly it's a sort of, I can't say it's a mass market book, but it's a conventional book. It's not doing anything flashy with language or form or anything. But what's really clever, I think, is the second half of the book is a series of instructions from manuals about how society has ended up with the situation of the line, and it touches on sort of capitalism in crisis, environmental disaster, race. It sort of very ingeniously reverses the situations of the developed West and the underdeveloped world, that certain countries in the undeveloped world now have all the power and all the riches, because they sort of have hit upon data mining and data control, and sort of blending that with sort of DNA engineering, all this sort of stuff. It's really, really well done. It's very inventive, it's very creative, and it's only just beyond our immediate horizons in terms of sort of speculative alternative ways for the world to go, particularly in a sort of post-COVID world. It's just really, really well done, and elevates it from being just a dystopian novel. It reminded me of The Power, but in an infinitely better way. The geopolitics and the sort of speculative elements in The Power by Naomi Alderman were just dumb, whereas here, they all were absolutely credible to me. So, you know, 5 stars. I was so pleasantly impressed with this, and it was recommended to me by one of my commenters, Neil Hutchins. So Neil, thanks very much. Spot on with that one. And on to The Listeners by Jordan Tannahill. I mean, like The Line, sort of ostensibly, again, it's not doing anything flashy with style or language or anything. It's again, I can't say mass market paperback, but it's quite a sort of conventional novel with elements of thriller and suspense and all that sort of thing. So a married woman with one daughter, who she treasures at most above everything. One night she wakes up, or she can't get to sleep because she's got this hum in her ear, and she sort of goes outside to try and track down its source, and thus begins a journey of collapse, because She can't shake this, she can't sort of work out what it is, no one believes her that she can hear it, including her husband and her daughter. She is a teacher at school, and one day one of her pupils comes in and reveals that he too can hear the hum. So the two of them form a sort of a duo, and they drive after school, trying to, all these sort of different industrial places to try and find out if it's the source of the hum. They are both aware, but she is a teacher, particularly that, you know, the optics on this look terrible, teacher with an underage schoolboy. It's not sexual in the slightest, but they are aware, or she is aware, of how it looks, and she's got to be very careful. But, you know, eventually she's busted, and even though she hasn't done anything wrong, but her defence is she's doing something that people deem as mad. So she, you know, her life falls apart. She loses her job. Her husband moves out, and the daughter gets so infuriated with her that she then moves into the dad's, you know, studio apartment, even though it's not set up for her. It's better than being with crazy mum. And the mother sort of seeks out and finds this support group of other people who can hear this hum, and the student is there as well, and they have regular meetings, and the leader of this is an academic who theorises that this is the earth, this is the sound of the earth, a sort of resonance, natural resonance of the earth. You know, could it be the earth in crisis screaming out? But no, he says it's a positive force if you give in, you know, if you allow yourself to enter it, and it just expands your sort of consciousness from your, you know, your selfish ego to being at one in harmony with the universe. Well, a lot of the other people at the support group can't accept this. They're going, no, it must have an actual source. And eventually there's a sort of a showdown, a set piece of a sort of, you know, siege situation with this community. So this book, in a way, asks, when is a cult not a cult? And that's when it's a pseudo-cult, when it has all these superficial trappings of a cult, but it's not looking to exploit its members, it's not asking for money, it's not asking for them to do anything. It's just a set of beliefs they believe, such as any sort of conspiracy theory brigade believe. So, Celia, I think you might be interested in this, because I know you're interested in cults, and it teeters the whole time on whether you know, this is a cult or not. It's not a perfect book. I think the foreshadowing in the book is very poor. It starts off with the fact that this woman is a meme sensation, so you know that something explosive is going to happen, and then it also sort of drops early into the action that the leader of the group, the academic, is going to sort of fall into disgrace as well. So it's sort of, I think it's a bit clumsy in how it foreshadows the big climax. So the big climax isn't that big, really, but it held my interest. I mean, I give it 3 stars because I couldn't really see. I wasn't that interested in the characters. Yes, I thought her collapse and fall from grace was good. I wasn't really into any of the other characters. And it was interesting, this sort of teetering line between a cult and a pseudo-cult. But ultimately, it didn't really want to pin down what the source of the hum was, and the options it gave you were a little unconvincing, I felt. So it's slightly a sort of a mishmash of different things, some more successful than others, but, you know, an entertaining enough read. 3 stars, as I say. And on to Leonardo Sciascia, To Each His Own. So 2 members of a small town in Sicily go out hunting on the first day of the hunting season, and both are themselves shot. And the assumption is that one of them is having an affair around town, and that's why he's being shot. Which it seems to be, from Sciascia's writing, the sort of go-to default position of the police when they don't want to open up to the fact that it might be to do with the mafia or other corrupt influences. It's easy enough to blame it on a crime of passion or an honour killing or whatever. But increasingly, an academic who's part of their social circle, who's on his summer holidays and therefore at a loose end, looks into the crime, sort of plays detective, and the focus comes more on the other guy who has an impeccable reputation that there's no way can it be him. You know, he wasn't fooling around town. And it's great. I can't speak any more than that because obviously it would be spoilers. But the one thing I've noticed that has sort of crept into my realisation, that Sciascia seems to have this sort of you know, archetypical belief in the three parts of women: Madonna, mother, whore, which may be, you know, particularly tied into sort of Italian and sort of Catholic thinking of yore. But he sort of buys into it. This is the second book of his I've read where women are portrayed as in one of those three guises, or maybe two of them are you know, together. So the mother figures in here, you know, the women having the affairs of the whores, and then the pure, you know, the projection of sort of purity of the Madonnas. So that has left a slightly sicky feeling in my mouth, I must say. I mean, I still think he's a great writer, but it's a shame that he sort of sunk to that sort of cliche, really. But, you know, 4.5 stars. And on to Gari Lutz, Divorcer. So I've read 2 previous Gari Lutz collections. Gari Lutz has transitioned into a woman, but all of the books that are available were written when he was Gary with a Y as a man, including this one. They've all been brought together in a collection in which are published under his female name, Gari, as in Gary L, Gari for short. So when I come to do my spreadsheet, this will be down under the women writers category, but you know, it was written when he was a man. And it's just, Gari Lutz works at the level of the sentence more than the level of the story, and that's why I like, you know, I'm down on short stories, but Gari Lutz sort of, you know, bursts through all of that. And in reading this, the third collection of his I've read, I suddenly realised that he has quite a lot in common with Ben Marcus, who is one of my favourite writers, in his use of language, in his sort of, I call them word detonations, you know, surprising combinations of words that sort of, you know, leap off the page. So this is the last story, called Womanesque, which is perhaps the most Gari Lutz story in the collection. The woman who was later to become my wife had gone off to a state school in a faraway state and parted from it baccalaureately, but no better in the head. So lots of B's there. Baccalaureately, but no better in the head. She afterward moved to the dorm-like district of the modestly rising city downriver. So again, lots of D's there. Streets sheared through it to avenues out of the blue, and the skies usually kept fooling you about the season. She went in for an overlapping look. Cloud grey cotton predominations above loose, seclusive skirts coming down as far as her socks. She pushed into employment as a medical biller, built up her personality with girlfriends, boyfriends, mothery old women who wanted younger women with arms thin as kindling. I just love it. I love the language. And again here, this fellow, had a forsaken life and a daily one, and it was only in the latter that he was the notary, who had to make himself visible for anyone bearing bunch-stapled papers to be stamped or given the prissy Commonwealth seal. He was all for helping these unhumming and unjoking folks to shimmy out of human affairs, though he thought of himself more as an emitter. So, you know, surprising word choices, wonderful sentences that sort of leap up and slap you around the face. They are about relationships. So there's one where a guy, his wife has just divorced him, left the house, she's cleaned out her belongings and left her sort of 3 most gnarly dresses, which he then tries on because he's trying to sort of preserve her presence. Or another one where a father has resolved to help his daughter with her homework, and given that the commitment that he needs to show in terms of time devoted to that, he sets his wife up with other men to sleep with because he can't fulfil that function. And the homework assignments with the daughter get increasingly perverse and unsettling. There's another one where a guy's wife has just died and he finds himself at this sort of business convention where he sort of recruits a young man and again dresses him up in his wife's dead clothes. So on the one hand, you know, well, Lutz has transitioned to a woman, there's a lot about men wearing women's clothes, therefore this is a sort of precursor to where his head's at. That may or may not be true, but I think the stories are much more than that. The reason I like Lutz as a short storyteller is that she writes stories about human beings in a similar fashion, saying similar things to the likes of Samantha Schweblin or Maria Machado, but she doesn't have to introduce supernatural elements like they do. she just does it through following the trails of strangeness in human beings. She doesn't need these outside forces of slightly sort of surreal, supernatural. That's why I like Lutz so much. 5 stars. And finally on to Assembly by Natasha Brown. So the female protagonist of this is of Afro-Caribbean descent, I think from Jamaica, with a Jamaican heritage, although she was born in the country. She works in high finance, stands out like a sore thumb there, which is something I can entirely relate to, because one of my best friends, when he left university and got a job in a blue chip British merchant bank, and was the only Jew there. And you know, when Israel was having one of its periodic assaults on the Palestinian territories, they would go to his desk and say, when are you going to sign up? When are you going to enlist, you know, for the Israeli army as a British Jew, which sort of made no sense at all. So I entirely understand the world that she's describing here, how she's viewed as a sort of, you know, alien presence among the sort of white English. And it's intersectional because as a woman also, you know, that certain sort of mundane tasks which would otherwise sort of fall through the cracks, it's assumed that she will pick them up. So for example, she's the only one who will address school assemblies about sort of the career options that she took, hence one of the meanings of the name assembly. Also, she gains a promotion, but it's a joint promotion. It's almost like a job share promotion with an older white guy, and you know, they suddenly get called to a meeting on Monday in New York. This is at the weekend when she's offered a family do, and it's expected and devolves to her that she will book the tickets, even though he's perfectly capable of it. But because she's a woman and younger and implicitly more junior, even though they're the same status. And she, you know, she does it. It's called Assembly not only because she addresses school assemblies, and she's always quizzing herself on what is she selling these aspirational girls. You know, is she selling them something that's genuine or not? But also, it's a book about disassembly, because she's disassembling herself at every aspect of her life, from her race, from her job, from her gender, from the fact that she has a rich white boyfriend who's sort of from an aristocratic background, and the setting for the book is that she and her boyfriend are going to a big family do at the boyfriend's sort of family estate. That you know, that's sort of the context of this. That she's on the cusp of undertaking this journey to an even more alien world of British landed aristocracy. And it's very good. It's very solid. I'm going to read 2 bits, which I think at this level the book works really well. Be the best, work harder, work smarter, exceed every expectation, but also be invisible, imperceptible. Don't make anyone uncomfortable. Don't inconvenience. Exist in the negative only, the space around. Do not insert yourself into the main narrative. Go unnoticed, become the air, open your eyes. So that's how she feels as a woman of colour in the sort of high finance world. And that's what that holds the dilemma when she's addressing these school assemblies. But that's the reality of how she has to do it. So is she right in promoting the world of high finance to other girls? And then another one. So this is, so obviously her and her boyfriend have got to the family estate ahead of the party. So the party is sort of being set up in a marquee in the garden. So this is that sort of strange time before the party has started, before the social, you know, environment is set up, where it's just her meeting the potential in-laws for the first time. I will be watched, that's the price of admission. They'll want to see my reactions to their abundance, polite restraint, concealed outrage, and a base desirous hunger beneath. I must play this part with a veneer of new millennial money coolness, serving up savage witticisms alongside the hors d'oeuvres. It's a fictionalisation of who I am, but my engagement transforms the fiction into truth. My thoughts, my ideas, even my identity can only exist as a response to the partygoers' words and actions, articulated along the perimeter of their form, reinforcing both their selfhood and its centrality to mine. How else can they be certain of who they are and what they aren't? Delineation requires a sharp black outline. So I think at that level, it's a really good book. These sort of insights and thoughts and thinking processes and self-analysis, not psychologically as much as social context, you know, the masks that we have to wear. But it did leave me feeling slightly cold. It was a bit too analytical, so I'll give it 4 stars. And on to what I'm currently reading. So, John McGregor, Lean Full Stand. So if you've ever watched my video on minimalist writing, you'll know that John McGregor is a bête noire of mine. I read his first 2 books, If No One Shall Speak of Small Things or Quiet Things, and a book called And Even the Dogs, and I hated them. I really did not get on with them. They are minimalist, small-scale, mundane, everyday lives, which is perfectly legitimate to write about, but they're boring. I'm not saying those lives are boring, but the books were boring because nothing happened, really. And I'd sworn off John McGregor ever since then. But I saw Bob the Bookerer talk about this, and this seems to me that he's actually doing something different. He's bursting out of the small scale, he's trying something with language. It's about a polar expedition that goes badly wrong, and one of the expeditioners comes back and ends up in hospital and is sort of trying to piece it all together and doesn't have the language for it. So I'm really looking forward to this, but it will be make or break, because if I don't like this, I will go back to where I was before and forswear ever reading John McGregor again. And this I saw Andrea at Infinite Text talking about, and the title unsurprisingly lures me in. Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead by Emily Austin, who I think is Canadian. Is that right? Yeah, Canadian. I mean, that is a Mark Nash title. It seems, you know, from Andrea talking about it, it seems to be a mixture of a woman with very morbid thoughts, which is what I'm interested in, but out of that sort of has a sort of existentialist attitude to life that, well, nothing really matters because we're all going to die. And I think Andrea felt parts of that motivating her actions was a little unsatisfying. That may or may not be the case. I mean, obviously, I'll let you know when I've read it. But in a way, to me, that would be less important than the laser-like stuff about sort of, you know, what are her morbid thoughts and how do they align with my own. So again, I'm really looking forward to that. So these will be my next 2 reads. So there you go, BookTube. Thank you very much. Just a personal, on a personal note. So I have had incredible support from the BookTube community for my novel, which is released this coming Thursday. I've had lots of people express interest in it. Lots of people, I think, have pre-ordered it or have said that they're going to pre-order it. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate that, because it can be a struggle in other spheres of trying to get your book's existence out there. You know, sort of through, you know, reviews on, you know, through literary magazines or newspapers or whatever. But the BookTube community as one has just sort of, you know, totally show me nothing but love and support and goodwill and good wishes for the book. So to each and every one of you, I want to express a really, really genuine thanks, because, you know, all the work that I do to push the book out there, I can honestly say that the response in BookTube is streets ahead of all the other spheres that I've been working in. So again, thank you very, very much. I'm deeply grateful and humbled to you. Okay, so till next time, thanks.